I'm with Chris from Gordon T. Jacob today, and we're going to talk about housing issues that we have with the lack of inventory in specifically Washington State on a national level. But I want to bring Chris in because he's a good friend of mine, been in the industry as far as construction, understands the mortgage side of things, real estate side of things, and so I want to pick his brain. And I just want to thank you for being here. So welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to having this conversation. We've talked a little bit off camera, but I think we can continue that and add some value to people that maybe are wondering where things are going and where may some opportunities be.
I don't know. I was thinking this morning, like, when did we meet or how did we meet? I don't know if I called on you because you were a builder, right? And I'm trying to like, hey, how can I get loans from you? But like, yeah, let's meet. And we started talking about life and everything else, and then got to know you more. I'm like, I don't know. I feel like it just has grown, but I'm trying to remember when we first met.
You reached out to me, and I think you were instrumental in really pushing me towards social media because you had started that earlier, and we weren't doing that as much at the time. We were flipping houses, we were spec building, and at that point, I didn't feel like I needed that. But as we started doing more custom construction and custom remodel work, you were talking to me the importance of getting something out there. And then, of course, we really dove headfirst into that area. But yeah, I mean, I think, has it been 5 to 7 years, I think, probably, that we've been connected now?
Yeah. I mean, I have a problem, like, remembering like 5 or 7 minutes.
That's right, yeah.
But yeah, we met for coffee, and that's actually, I'm starting to remember because like you do really good. I don't know if I saw one of your homes. Like, you need to start, doing chronicles of what you're doing and educating people, because you work with Mitzi, you work with your wife.
Yeah.
And it's actually a really cool thing. I work with my wife, and people, I think that resonates with people, and you have a ton of knowledge. So anyways, I'll let you explain.
Well, as you said, I mean, I've got a pretty diverse background. We were involved in advertising in the 90s, and then kind of in the early 2000s, we launched into mortgage. And so I've got quite a bit of experience in that. And we kind of stumbled into construction in 2009. The whole mortgage industry was really in upheaval and everything was kind of switching. And at the time, I thought a really good business practice could be to try to go out and become the preferred lender for a lot of these builders that weren't building. And so a partner and I, we raised some capital and we partnered with some banks. So we had money and we had lots, and we thought, okay, we're going to go out to builders and we're going to want to, capture their takeout loans. And this was third quarter of 2009. We couldn't find any. I mean, I think we interviewed like 20 builders. Couldn't find one builder that wanted to jump back in. And of course, they had just been annihilated. I mean, a lot of them that had gone bankrupt, or just so much of the opportunity that they thought they were just about to capture, all was taken from them. And so I was really feeling stumped, and one of the investors said, well, why don't you start building? And I'm like, gosh, I don't know how to hang a door. What do you mean by that? So they're like, hey, we can get you connected to superintendent. And so, in fourth quarter of 2009, we started spec building. Back then, the primary market was military first-time home buyers. We live in Pierce County, and JBLM has the bases there, and they were, rates were relatively low. Those were some of the easiest loans to get, were VA loans. So we started to build in that way. And then we kind of progressed up to move up buyers and doing larger homes. And maybe in 2000 and, I guess it would have been like 2014, we saw real opportunities around flipping houses. And so there was a lot of housing that was able to buy at off market. And so we started doing that quite a bit. And then, an interesting dynamic happened is a lot of people started seeing friends making money flipping houses. So everybody started getting into doing that. And we started finding the deals that we would have gotten in the past, we were losing to people that may be doing the work themselves, or maybe they didn't really understand their cost structure and they were bidding higher than us. And So we kind of then migrated to, well, gosh, if we know how to acquire, we know how to remodel, we should offer those services to homeowners. So we launched Gordon T. Jacob at that time. And at that time, we came up with this name, and the name is Gordon is the middle name of my younger son, and T is the middle initial of my daughter, and Jacob is the middle name of my oldest son. And we actually have a video on our website back in 2014 saying how we came up with the name. And we, on video, said, who knows, maybe someday our kids will actually want to be a part of the family business. Well, fast forward to today, all of our kids are involved. My daughter-in-law is involved, and it's just really been a great thing being able to build this business together with our kids and in our community, and having great friends like you. And I mean, being successful in business is really about this constant pivot. The market's always changing. You got to be aware of that. You got to have friends in your corner that you're willing to be vulnerable with, not have all the answers, and get feedback, because we're always better together. Like, if you can make decisions in collaboration, it's usually better than what we would make on our own. And so I appreciate you being part of that collaborative effort with me, helping us to kind of migrate where we are right now.
A lot of what my focus is with this is the education piece of it.
Yeah.
And part of that education piece of it is leveraging people like you, and on the professional side, but also on the personal side, that have the integrity and the vision and the counsel. Like, I kind of revert back to that. I mean, you've given me some really good advice, business advice and life advice. Like, hey, I'm struggling with this, and because you've gone through it, right? And vice versa. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like there's an opportunity in with this platform where we can educate people about what's going on in mortgage real estate and construction and the needs, and distill down all the information you hear, on a national level into like real life on here's how it's impacting it right now. Here's a story, here's a situation, a scenario that we were able to help someone achieve something. Mm-hmm. With me and my business, we try to get people into homes with financing. You're trying to get people the home that they want. They've always wanted, into a home that, whether you're building or remodeling it. And you do an amazing job, and you tell that story very well with you and your family. And it's exciting. You're part of that. So people, in my opinion, when I look at you and Gordon T. Jacob, you and Mitzi and your entire family, it's like, I'm invested in that because you're sharing that. And that's important. We want to be vulnerable. Like, this is where the value is at, not necessarily just here's a rate, here's my fee, here's this price per square foot. I mean, okay, what are you going to do for me? How are you going to impact, not just me and my family, but what else are you doing in the community? You do a lot of stuff with the church, right? That means something to me. And should mean something to a lot of people that are watching this. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. But, it's good. It's good to have you here. And it's something I've been wanting to do. But the topic of infill, middle housing, you reached out to me asking if I had anyone that was looking to buy that was approved to a certain amount, and there was kind of a unique opportunity. And so I thought, let me look and let's see what that looks like. And then it got me kind of thinking, like, let's kind of bring this out and really talk about what that means. Because, like, what does high density mean? What does middle housing mean? We'll show an example of one that you did in Tacoma that I think is actually really cool. And it's that project solves so many other needs. Solves housing for one, but it also solves, in my opinion, like generational concerns about kids that can't necessarily afford homes right now, or boomers that might be in a situation where their home doesn't suit them anymore. We'll get into some of the details about what we are expecting, at least the state is expecting, what the need is as far as number of units, which is pretty staggering.
Right.
But what does that do? How do we solve real life problems one at a time till we get to that ability to start scaling it? Because cities and municipalities don't have that figured out yet.
Yeah. This idea of missing middle really comes back to what you just brought up, which is Washington is growing rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
They're expecting over the next 20 years the need for 1 million more doors. And when you say that, if you were to really look at where the majority of construction is, it's not in downtown Seattle. It's not in downtown Tacoma. It's not in necessarily downtown Bellevue. It's in peripheral areas. The problem is that's not where people work. It's not where people want to go to restaurants. It's not where there's transportation. So, the state of Washington is trying to figure out how can we bring density into the areas where people actually want to live. And so, whether that's an infill lot or whether that's, allowing multiple units to go on a lot that would traditionally have just had one residence on it.
Right. So infill is, I guess, break that down to my terms.
Yeah. So infill would just mean that you have a vacant lot in a neighborhood that's already established.
Right. So there's an existing home on there, right?
Or there could be a vacant lot in a neighborhood that's already established. That would be an infill example. And then another example of what I was mentioning is you might have a house on a lot that is in a town like Tacoma that now legislation is passed that will allow you to add a second home on that lot. And they're doing that again because they see the need to have multiple strategies in place to accommodate this 1 million doors over 20 years.
Right.
And as you mentioned earlier, I think that there's a lot of, I think that, when you have a changing market like we have right now, we can look at that from the difficult side. The interest rates are high, cost of construction's high, cost of acquisition's high. Those are all true. But I like to, as an entrepreneur, I got to constantly be asking, where are the opportunities right now? And going back to the conversation that I started with you about this, it's because I really believe that there are huge opportunities in front that a lot of people are just totally unaware of. And this project that I called you on, I bought a 1,000 square foot house off market. It had been built maybe 25 years ago. It was livable, but, pretty rough. It had 3-bedroom, 1.25 bath. The bathroom was kind of in the laundry room. And so, I brought in a realtor, a friend of mine that I knew had been kind of further along in their knowledge of DADUs. They've been doing stuff for the last year. And I was like, okay, if I got this, what could this be worth if we were to build a DADU? And, my son is involved in entitlements, and we started looking at site plans and what could be possible. So what we ended up doing is we turned that main house into a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, fully remodeled, and brought it kind of up to a contemporary standard, everything new on the inside, basically. And then we built 700 square foot, 2-bedroom, 1-bath house in the backyard. So now all of a sudden what you have is the equivalence of a duplex, because you got 2 doors on one lot, but there's no common wall. And there's a lot of opportunity, whether that would be for an investor. But I think the biggest opportunity, and the reason why I called you, is really for a family that would want to have maybe, mom and dad live in the main home, an adult child in the DADU, or potentially an adult family living in the main home and an aging parent that would move into the DADU. The reason why I think that this is huge, there's really 2 things. Number one is, if you look at the average age of baby boomers, they're going to hit their peak over the next, I believe, 10 to 12 years or something. So you're going to see a massive exodus where baby boomers have raised their kids. They're living in these 2,500 to 4,000 foot homes that oftentimes have stairs. It's not possible for them to maintain that size of a home and maybe age in place, to looking at, okay, am I going to move into an assisted living scenario? Well, a lot of kids that may live in the same towns as their parents would say, well, I would rather have mom and dad, or mom or dad only live with me, but have their own privacy of their own home. So number one, I think a lot of people aren't aware of this that opportunity existing. So that's first thing. And that new legislation passed this year in Washington. It has been formally adopted by Seattle. It was now adopted by Tacoma. It's fully going. And all the other municipalities around Washington are now in the process of figuring out how they can roll this out. So I think it's going to become more common knowledge. So I think there's going to be huge opportunities around that, opportunities for realtors to say, okay, mom and dad, these aging baby boomers are going to sell. It's like, where do we move them? Well, if you have a dual strategy approach to not only help this aging population sell their home, but to assist them in what their options are, it can really set you apart from the realtor that's not being strategic right now and not seeing where the opportunities lie moving forward.
I work with several financial advisors, and when we talk with their clients about managing debt associated with potentially their largest asset, their home, right? So we look at that, and that's part of the financial plan. But when you have something to where, okay, mom and dad have this house that they're not able to go up and down the stairs. They might own it outright, have $1 million, $2 million, $500,000 in equity in the thing. That money's dead money, right? That's not doing anything for them. And then you look at, okay, well, where do we go, right? And so we have a inventory issue, right? That's been a problem. It's been a compounding problem, really after 2008, 9, the whole housing crisis, because at some point it was hard for builders. Builders weren't willing to take that risk to start building. So we've been in this deficit for a bit. It's just now it's really getting compounded. So,
and what that impacts is supply always impacts the price.
Exactly.
So it young generation right now is complaining about the affordability of real estate, which is a real problem. But until we get more doors, it's always going to be a problem,
right?
Because if it's just interest rates, like a lot of people just think, well, my problem would be solved if it's interest rates. The problem is, you and I both know this. If interest rates drop 2 points, what's going to happen to the cost of housing? It's going to go up because way more people are going to want to buy at that point because their affordability is going to go up then. And so really the goal here needs to be, we need more doors.
Right. Their perceived affordability is going to go up, right? It sounds better to have a lower interest rate, but they're paying more.
Exactly.
It's funny because we do a lot of strategy with our clients, and that's the one thing, like, let's play this game. Let's map this out. And we're not making up numbers. These are projected numbers. Yeah. We'll let them pick projected or historic.
Yeah.
Which one do you want? Oh, let's go historic. Cool. Look at that looks like in a year. And if rates were to drop this, where's that going to be?
Yeah.
Weird. The payment is almost identical.
Right.
Right. So we always talk about, the strategy. There's 3 things that are really important: acquisition time, acquisition cost, and then the cost of that money.
Yeah.
Okay. We can't change the first one, can't change the second one, but we can, in theory, change the third one. You don't want to guarantee that you can refinance because that's not right.
Yeah.
But in theory, you can, right? And at some point, you could, depending on the type of loan that you have. There's insurance, mortgage insurance, that type of things, characteristics to that loan. You could get out of that, right? And the money that you're borrowing, the equity position you have, all that will impact your cost of money over time. So we get into the weeds there and kind of show them that. But to your point, we need more doors. It's supply and demand. And this has been said millions of times by millions of people in our industry about supply and demand 101. What does that mean? It means there's not enough supply. And it's a problem that's going to get compounded as rates start to come down, which they are starting to come down again. It's going to get worse. And so 1 million doors, if you look at the logistics of building 1 million units in 20 years by 2044, that's staggering. I don't know how real that is. Right. And then that's like, let's throw that out to all the cities in the state. Right. And now you guys figure it out. Well, talking to some friends of mine that actually work for the city on the planning side, like, okay, well, how do we deal with utilities, the infrastructure, the parking, schools,
staffing,
police,
even
exactly. So there's that problem is just a compounding problem. Doesn't mean that you can't work through it. It's just, and so we can talk about all the things that are kind of against us on that aspect of it, but what I want to get into and focus on today is just that opportunity, because that opportunity that you brought up is just one of them.
Yeah.
The opportunity to where, for my realtor friends that are out there, like, had this conversation yesterday. You have someone that, in theory, if you do this right, you could have a total of transactions with one client. If they need to sell their home because it's too big, they need to downsize, then they're able to buy something, and maybe they help their kid now with buying something that's attached. Hey, I need someone that's going to be able to help me out, take me to doctor's appointments, whatever that might be. You talk about just multi-generational families is a real thing right now because of affordability, because of lack of inventory. This solves that, right? But it also solves the reason why you called me, like, hey, do you have anyone that's pre-approved for this amount? Because I think we could, based on what the projected rents are going to be on this other unit, we can offset that expense, and now they can qualify for a higher loan amount, which we've done before. It's just, I thought that was kind of interesting because you can't really market it that way based on what's on the MLS.
Well, that's really, Rob, that's really the inherent challenge and why I was reaching out, because I was seeing the number of eyeballs hitting our project, and it wasn't a good number, right? Because, again, coming from a mortgage background, what I know is if a client comes to you and you pre-approve them to, let's say, 450,000, where does that 450 come from? It comes from, at today's interest rate with your debt to income, this is what your max qualification is, or this is if you're only comfortable with this monthly payment, here's your max purchase price. The problem is when you have a single family home with the DADU, it's going to go way beyond that, but there's no way on the MLS to show that. So if somebody was pre-approved for 450, they go to their realtor and say, hey, I'm approved for 450. What houses in the neighborhood I want to live are available? My home wasn't going to show up because it was listed at 725. So I realized really quick that we had to somehow think outside of the box, and we had to use another form of marketing because it wasn't going to be it wasn't even going to hit the radar of the buyers that I knew this could be. I mean, there's so many young people right now that want to add doors. They want to buy duplexes, or they want to build passive income over time. They want to have a retirement income based on real estate. And oftentimes it's difficult to get started. I just had a conversation with a friend this morning, and he used a statement that I thought was profound. He says, it feels like a gamble for me to do something. And I said, I get that, but I think it would almost always feel like a gamble. Like if you have a primary residence and you want to add a rental property, you want to buy a duplex, probably most of the time in history for most people, it felt really scary. It just did, because, whether it's the market is hot and the cost of acquisition is too high, or whether the interest rates are high and my monthly payment doesn't cash flow as much as I want, or hey, because of the interest rate, I got to put more money down to make it cash flow, and now my savings is depleted. It feels scary. But if we look at, going back to your point of historically, real estate appreciates.
Yep.
It may go back down for 2 or 3 or 4 years. I mean, look how much it went back down in 2009. And where are we now? Double or triple what it was? Yeah. I mean, it went down in 2009, 2010. Where is it now from there? I mean, depending on your area, I mean, it's at least double. It could be triple what it was then.
Yeah. Alvina and we owned a home, bought it in 2004. Our first rental we bought was 2007, May of 2007, right? So it closed in June of 2007. So you know what happens after that, right? So I was, before we even pulled the trigger on it, I found out that she was pregnant with her second. And so she's like, do we do this? I'm like, so back in my mind, the emotion, I'm like, this is really scary.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all the more reason to do this.
Yeah.
Because I need this as an investment. So fast forward to the 2009, 2010, you look at Zillow's estimate, and it's like half of what I paid for it. And all these clients are short selling, foreclosing, walking away, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't need to do that. And I had to go back to myself back in 2007, like, why did I do this? This is an investment. I still have someone that's living there. They're still helping me pay this investment off.
Yeah.
Fast forward to today, it's worth 4 times the amount that
Yeah.
I paid for it. So it is the long game, and that's the one thing when I meet with clients, we talk about the strategy. Because if you walk in first meeting, this is the only time you and I can have a conversation where there really isn't any emotion involved.
Mm-hmm.
You and your family didn't walk through the door of this house and fell in love with it and start envisioning, holidays and parties and life events there, right? That's a real emotional thing. Even though you don't think it might be, there's some triggers there that like,
Yeah.
okay, I don't want to fall in love with this place. So we talk about putting on our investor hat and saying, okay, here's what that looks like. Here's the strategy. Let's map this out. Are you going to be there 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? What does it look like? Cool. Let's look at that, because that's where it starts arming people with the ability, like, okay, now I have foresight. I have the vision on why I'm doing this. It takes that fear away. So we do so much on the front end that when they're out going, our realtor friends they have the easy job. They can go shopping. They just got to do math homework with us, but we do that very intentionally and spend a lot of time on the front end just so we don't have those issues, because there's nothing worse than buyer's remorse on a home. And then we talk about, hey, what happens if market crashes? Well, this is what happened to me.
Yeah.
And this was my strategy. And yes, I know what that feels like, but thank goodness I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything crazy because of emotion or fear. I went back to like, no, this was a smart decision. It's an investment. Do I need to sell it now? No. Do I want to sell it now? No. Then why am I even worried about it?
Yeah.
Right. Write it out. So it's interesting. So back to what we were talking about with your home that you built the DADU. It was really interesting because it opens up a different opportunity for people that when you do a search, it doesn't show up. But that extra unit on the lending world, we can actually use that and order an appraisal, that an appraiser is going to look at what the market rent is for the area. And we can have that as part of the loan, to where we'll take a percentage of that to offset that payment. So someone that might be pre-approved for 500,000 now can buy a 725 home, which I'm not sure what the person ended up buying it, but if that was the situation, it sounds like it might have been, but that's huge. Now you have someone that has an investment property, has a home that they're living in, and they're building equity, and you have someone that's already starting to help them pay their costs, fixed costs.
Well, here's a funny thing, Rob, is that I think I had mentioned to you this morning that I asked the realtor to check in on who this buyer was, and it ended up being exactly what we're talking about today. It was a young professional that was buying the main home, and their parents were wanting to downsize, and they were going to live in the DADU behind. So it's exactly what we're talking about. This idea of having generational families living together is exactly what ended up executing this. But one thing I want to say is that I think if we look at the opportunity, and let me just say one other thing before I go into this, we're definitely in an early adopter state right now, right? Most people are unaware of exactly what the legislation is around DADUs and what the opportunities are. And because of that, I think there's enormous opportunity for people that dive into this right now and learn and figure out what kind of value can they add to this opportunity. So I would say if you're an investor today, I've flipped a lot of houses in the past, and I've been kind of leery of doing it. I kind of focused on flipping on kind of like median house price. I never went high up. And so over the last few years, it's been harder to find deals like that, that I was willing to jump in on. And I think for an investor, this DADU opportunity offers a huge opportunity, because now maybe your margin on the acquisition of that main house is still not as much as you want, but there is a margin between the cost of construction in the DADU and the value of the DADU. For example, if you're an investor and let's just say you can buy a house for, I'll just use Tacoma as a market. Let's say you can buy 1,000 square foot home that's in not great condition, but maybe it's 275 to 300 grand. Okay. Well, if you remodeled that and you paid, let's say 100 grand to remodel it, it may only be worth 425 to 450. So by the time you pay cost of money, cost of sale, you're making no money, right? But if you build a DADU, let's say you spend $225,000 building that DADU to a builder like me, that might add $325,000 or $350,000 of value. So now all of a sudden you have an extra $100,000 to $125,000 of margin. So maybe you only had $25,000 to $50,000 margin in the acquisition of the main house, but you've added $100,000 of margin by adding that DADU. So what am I saying? Well, traditionally, a guy like me would have passed on buying that main house because there just wasn't enough margin in it. In other words, I wouldn't have been able to pay $275,000 to $300,000. I would have had to get it off market for $200,000 or something. Well, that's harder to find. Well, now all of a sudden there's going to open up a lot more opportunities because you don't have to get this 1 in a million deal because you can make money actually on the construction of the day. So that's the investor. Huge opportunity there. Where is the opportunity for like a realtor that may be listening today? It's kind of in what you said. I mean, realtors right now, the number of transactions are dramatically lower than what they were 2 to 3 years ago, right? They're a commission sales rep that makes commission based on transaction closings. So this is an opportunity for a realtor to actually be proactive in creating transactions by providing a service that is going to happen. It's not if, it is when. The aging baby boomers over the next 5 to 15 years are going to be a historic number of people are going to transition from larger homes that they raise their family to either assisted living or properties on their children's lots. And so the question is, who's going to capture that? Who's going to provide that incredible service when you go back to talking about character, talking about integrity, how to diversify yourself or to differentiate yourself in the marketplace? It's not thinking so much about the transaction. It's saying like, how can I help families through a very important part of their history, helping their parents transition well? If I can have a great turnkey strategy as a realtor where I've got the right builder in place, I've got the right lender in place, that we can provide a turnkey strategy for mom and dad to move out of their home, to capture that equity. Like you said, it could be $500,000+ of equity in their home, to construct a home and to have that be a seamless transition. Yep. That can create a huge opportunity for the real estate base here in the state of Washington over the coming years.
Absolutely. So I want to take a step back because I'm realizing we're using a lot of jargon.
Yeah.
So ADU,
yeah,
DADU.
Yeah.
Explain the difference.
So ADU stands for additional dwelling unit. That usually represents something like a house had a garage and they converted the garage to an additional apartment, which would have its own bathroom, its own kitchen, its own laundry room. That would be an ADU. Could also be a split level where, they would divide off at the stairs, the upstairs from the downstairs. Think of it like a duplex. Mm-hmm. But it could be a split level. It could be a daylight basement rambler where you close off the stairs and you access now that downstairs from an outside door. And there's still requirements about that. I mean, you need some kind of fire assembly that's going to make the downstairs unit safe from the upstairs. But in essence, you're just making sure you're creating a kitchen, you're creating a bathroom and a laundry room, and creating a separate apartment or a living space for a person. So that's an ADU. A DADU is a detached equivalent of that. So that could be converting a detached garage to an apartment. It could be adding an apartment above a detached garage. It could be a backyard that you create a whole new structure where it was just a yard in the past. But both of those, like I say, the legislation around that in the state of Washington is moving heavily towards this goal, and they're providing huge opportunities for homeowners and investors and builders to make that happen.
Right. Yeah. Talking to my friend in the local city. It was interesting because one of the things that he mentioned was looking at the high density and in relation to transportation. I mentioned earlier about the parking. You know, where it's great that street parking is one thing, but if you add 5 more units, or the total of 5 units, 4 more units, where are they going to park, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where some cities are struggling with, like, how do we have the high density in certain areas, and then how many cars do we allow? Is there we have to do a parking garage?
Yeah.
And a lot of that doesn't pencil. There's no investor that's going to do that. And then a lot of the cities are also looking for, if we're going to add higher density, we also want retail mixed in that. Well, that adds a whole nother layer of things. So
Yeah.
I listened to the mayor of Spokane, listened to the mayor of I want to say it's Bothell, talk about this, and it's two different problems with the same initiative. Like, we need more housing. So Eastern Washington has the exact same problems.
Yeah.
Um, as something that's going to be a little more dense in general, right? I mean, we're on that up and down I-5 corridor. You can't really go east and west very far. It's usually north, south, or up.
Yeah.
So
let me respond to that, because there's at Gordon T. Jacob, we do both remodel and DADU as one side of our company, but we also do multifamily, as you know. And the requirements I'll just speak to the city of Tacoma right now, because they're not as far along as Seattle, but they're further along than many of the other municipalities in Washington. And so what Tacoma is saying is, on your ADU or your DADU, you don't have to have off-street parking for that. You do have to have continuous walking space from the road to your DADU, and a lot of that has to do with, like, think of fire. If there was a fire in the property, it has to be a clear way to know where is this back unit. So there is that requirement. But going back to your point about transportation and parking as it pertains to multifamily, we're doing a lot of multifamily in this missing middle model still. So in other words, what we're doing right now is we're buying typically 50 by 130 lots in the city of Tacoma, up to 100 by 130 lots. We have bought some slightly larger in Tacoma, but there's not a lot of those. Most lots in Tacoma are 20 foot, 5 foot wide, up to 100 foot wide. Okay. And if it has an alley, they're typically 130 feet deep, although they could have been subdivided previously and be half of that. But we're buying these lots, and we're providing rentals, really going after the missing middle. So we're doing both apartments that could be, think of it, 3-story high, one secured front door, central staircase, 3 stories high, 4 apartments per floor, so 12 unit. We're doing some that have more of a mix, and that might be a mix of studios, 1 bedrooms, and 2 bedrooms. We're doing another design right now where we have actually 20 doors on a 65 foot wide lot. So the structure is 50 foot wide instead of 40. It's a little bit deeper, and we're able to get 20 doors, and it's a mixture of more studios and 1 bedrooms, less 2 bedrooms. But what I would say we're focused most on right now is doing stacked duplexes. And so this is really going after this missing middle model, and it's a heavy focus of ours. I think we've got 3 now that have been completed in the last year, and we've got 6 more that we are in the process of either building or architecting or permitting right now. And going back to the transportation and the parking, so you get credits based on proximity to parks and also transportation. So if you're close to bus lines, you can get credits for that. If you're close to parks, you can get credits for that against the off-street parking requirements.
So what do you mean by credits?
So let's say you were going to build 8 doors on a lot. You may, depending on the area, some areas may require no off-street parking, just simply because of the zoning in that area doesn't require off-street parking. Others could require one stall per door, depending on the zoning, or even more. But what many of the areas that we're building in right now, they're giving us credits against that one stall per door, um, or even less than that. So we're able to get credits against that so that we would have maybe half of that. So we might only have to provide a half a stall per door of off-street parking, because the city knows this is really a problem. I mean, we were at a meeting with my entitlements officer, who's one of my sons, in the last few months, and they don't have this all figured out, because the transportation, while it may be dialed in Seattle, it's not dialed in Tacoma. And so a lot of people still have homes, or still have cars in Tacoma. Maybe we don't have the infrastructure of bus lines or trains or restaurants or grocery stores in Tacoma that they may have in the urban areas of Seattle. So this idea that, everybody has a car, everybody's going to be parking on the road, is a real challenge. And they're having to figure out how all of that's going to work. But I will tell you this, Rob, that if they required an off-street stall per door in Tacoma, it would kill all the deals, because you need more density. You need to create doors, and parking stalls take up a lot of space. Mm-hmm. So it's some kind of combination of that, and it's all getting worked out. And, my entitlement officer knows a lot more of the details of this than I do per area and per zoning area. But it is a challenge, and it's something that has to be worked out. And when we're looking at the feasibility of an opportunity, all of those things come into play. What can be built could be limited by the amount of off-street parking that's going to be required.
Are you guys moving towards having approved floor plans where it's almost like if you go to like a national builder where they have just using like the Westcott model, right? It's this here's the characteristic square footage, and here's this elevation of it, and there's this elevation of it, and then you have that where you could. Are you moving that direction, or is it going to be kind of custom for every? Because if you need,
we're doing that as a builder, no question, because our ability to do something and know our cost structure and the speed of which we can build is more efficient when we're building something we've already built. No question. What we're really trying to be informative with the building departments is the importance of them moving towards having like approved builders, approved plans, like base plan type things. Why is that important? Well, because when you look at when you ask yourself the question, is the affordability, what's the affordability of housing, whether it's buying or renting? Most people would say, well, it's not good. It's like a historic problems right now. The challenge is the cost of dirt is not getting less. The cost of construction is not getting less. The cost of labor is not getting less. I mean, it's all at highs. So what things can we control? Well, one thing we can control is the time in which it takes to acquire dirt and to stabilize that, whether that would lead towards a sale or it would lead towards a renter moving in. And right now, a big challenge in that is building departments. We're saying to them, look, you've got to become more efficient. We've got to get this done faster, because ultimately this impacts the cost of us building this if it takes longer, number one. Number two, if you look at this idea of 1 million doors over 20 years, the speed of which builders can get permits directly connects to whether or not that's even possible. When you say that number sounds daunting, well, it is definitely daunting if it takes, from the day you turn in a permit, it takes a year to get a building permit. I mean, when you turn in a plan and you say, I want to build something, whether it's, an 8-unit apartment, a 20-unit apartment, or even a home, if it's taking a year to get a building permit, that's a problem, because that's not going to close the gap. I mean, the speed of which our population is growing and the demand of which housing is growing is not able to be met unless we're churning out permits faster. So it's a real challenge. And I mean, in fairness to the building departments, part of that I think is culture. I mean, my son Gavin and I were at a gathering of realtors. I think Chicago Title had put this on, and we had the chance to talk to one of the leaders in the Washington State Department of Commerce. And you know, a lot of the people were praising them on the new legislation and promoting the density, and all that stuff is true. Um, but there's also challenges that, and he asked me what do I think, and I said, well, I think one of the challenges is that if you're a plan reviewer in a building department, do you see job security in finding problems? And he said, I don't really understand what you mean by that. I said, well, if you go to buy a house, most people are going to want to do traditionally an inspection. If they hire an inspector for $400 or $500, if they produce a report and they find no problems with the house, they inherently feel like that inspector did a bad job, right? They want to have that inspector find problems that protects them as the buyer. I think that's how building departments are. They're looking for problems. So think about this: when a builder like us submits for a building plan for permit, we're using skilled architects that have oftentimes been in the community for 15, 20, 25 years or longer. We're working with civil engineers, structural engineers, electrical engineers, people that have been around for a long time. Your plan reviewers oftentimes have 2 years of experience, 5 years of experience, 7 years of experience, and they're creating comments. They're questioning things on the plan as if they have more authority and more knowledge than some of these engineers that we have building our plans. And I think that's part of the problem, is that I think they feel like that their job is to stick to the new codes, the new design standards, and to find problems. And what happens is when they do that, they create comments that then have to be brought back to the builder. The builder then has to determine what are all these comments. Who do I have to send them to? I have to send them to the architect, the civil engineer, the structural engineer, maybe the fire engineer. And then we have to wait for them to respond to all those comments. We have to then collect all those things back. Then we have to resubmit. That often takes 30, 45, 60 days then for those plan reviewers within a municipality to then review those and determine if they're met and satisfied. Well, imagine if that process takes 2 or 3 or 4 reviews. The time is devastating to the builder. The cost is devastating, because every time that we send those back to an architect or an engineer, that's costing the builder more money. Well, what does the builder do? Well, they don't have the ability to eat that. So now that comes back to the buyer of the home, the buyer of the DADU, the renter in the apartment. So all of it's bad. It's increasing the time to market. It's increasing the cost of the market. So why do I say this? Because ultimately, I think the building departments need to change the culture. They need to think, how can I streamline this process that when a builder that's been in our market a lot, that's provided great product and services over a certain amount of time, is submitting for a building permit, how can we give them some kind of preferred status? And then the question is, if they're submitting for a building permit on a plan that's already been approved, like in the last 6 months, 3 months, 1 year, is there some way that we can make that more efficient? Instead of looking at that like it's something that's brand new, that's never been seen before, is there a way for us to fast track that to permit? Because number one, that's going to make it less expensive to the builder, which ultimately is going to mean it's less expensive to the consumer, but it's also the speed. And if you go back to the supply and demand thing, until we can increase the supply, we're not going to keep up with the demand, and the costs are going to keep going up. So we actually need building departments to become more efficient so that the cost to the consumer goes down, because the supply is surpassing the demand. Then we can actually start getting ahead of this.
stat I read was 100, I think it was 168,000 homes right now is needed in the state of Washington. We're saying a million in 20 years. So it kind of shows you the growth that they're expecting. And so it's going to take a year, 6 months to a year for permitting. There's no way. There's no way. There's no way, or there's going to be a mass amount of builders and developers that are trying to do this.
Yeah.
To where there's just, but not everyone's doing this. I mean, I only know you and two others right now that are really in the middle of it and have actually done it.
Yeah.
And are consistently pursuing it, right?
And the real challenge for us, Rob, is that, as a missing middle developer, our 12 units to 20 unit type projects, they're taking about the same amount of time as an institutional developer that's coming in and building a 160 unit apartment. I mean,
Right.
If it's taken them a year to get a permit on 160 units for an institutional investor, it's got to take less than that for the local developers that are really focused on this missing middle. Because if you really look at the amount of housing, the national builders, the institutional investors, they're not going to be able to produce this million doors. It's got to be the local kind of scaled spec builders, local developers that are buying these smaller lots, these infill lots. We've got to make them more effective in being able to acquire this dirt and build something that's attractive to our local market and do it cost effectively. And right now, it's just not as good as it needs to be. So there's got to be a lot of conversations, and it doesn't work to walk into a meeting with the building department and just yell. I mean, that doesn't work. I mean, because I think in the mindset of these plan reviewers, and I really do believe this, Rob. I just had a conversation with a friend of mine that's been developing now for the last 5 to 7 years. He's focused on this missing middle. And I said, I think the answer isn't to be adversarial to the building department. Because I do believe that if you walk into a meeting and say, can you help me? The average planner wants to do that. But from a high level perspective, if you look, you talked about mayors earlier, or the executives that are running the building departments, they have to be the ones that are establishing the culture, saying, look, we have to become faster. And faster doesn't mean that they work harder. It has to be their mindset. It has to be that we figure out some way to streamline things that make sense. Like, we're building this duplex, this stacked duplex right now, and I mentioned my friend a minute ago, and he just told me this morning that he's built 64 of these duplexes over the last few years, and we've done, I don't know how many have we done. We've done a quarter of that or something, but we've got 18 more that are either being built or being permitted right now, and when we submit for that, we shouldn't be assuming that we're going to have to go through 2 or 3 reviews. We've literally built this repeatedly in the city limits over the last year or two, and we're not changing the plan. It's the same plan. Why is there even a review necessary? It should be, oh, yeah, this was built at this address, this address, this address, this address within the last year. The energy code hasn't changed, so therefore it's approved. Right. Like literally stamped within a day of receipt. Like that kind of streamline could make a massive impact on the cost to us and the ability for us to produce doors that are great housing that people actually need.
Right. Well, yeah, they should be familiar.
Yeah.
Right? There should be a relationship there. And yeah, you want to, right? Some builders sometimes like to yell.
One thing I will say that I think, this is a transitory time for us right now as a country. Obviously, 2020 brought a huge shift, and a lot of organizations kind of were forced to allow people to work from home. That created probably an improved work-life balance for a lot of people that got comfortable working from home. I think building departments fell right into that. I've seen more. in 2020, 2021, even 2022, I think most building departments were not open for builders or homeowners to come in and meet with plan reviewers. That's kind of opened up more now. I still don't know if I think a lot of people are still able, at least part time, to work from home. But one thing I will say about that is that uh, I can see that there is probably a cost benefit to many business owners to feel like they're allowing their employees to work from home because the cost of space can be expensive.
Right.
Obviously, there's a big push from a younger generation that have children and the cost of childcare that it's hugely valuable for them to be able to work from home. But I would say, from a standpoint of efficiency, there is absolutely enormous benefits on being able to sit in front of an individual face to face and say, how can we get this done and get it done quickly?
Right.
And I'll use an example of something that I feel like was quite common prior to 2020 for me, less on a multifamily perspective, but more on a single family. Let's say I was struggling with something and I was getting, comments on something. If I scheduled a meeting and let's say I had comments from several different plan reviewers and I scheduled a meeting with one plan reviewer and I said, look, help me to solve this problem. Oftentimes what I found is that plan reviewer would say, okay, I'll make a comment on the plan that if you do this, I'll approve it. And I might say something like, well, if you approve that with that change, what would happen to these other comments? And they're like, oh, so and so would sign off if I did that. And they would actually go over to their desk and say, look, I'm getting confirmation right now that Chris is going to make this change. He's going to have this submitted tomorrow. I'm planning to sign off on this later today. And they might say, well, look, if you sign off on this later today, I'll look at it tomorrow morning and I'll sign off on it too. Where today, in today's environment, that might be 30 days
Right.
that it takes to get that sign off. It was done in a few hours when it was more common for people to be able to meet face to face. So I wouldn't be surprised that there's going to be a move more in the direction of the importance of face to face, because again, I don't believe that plan reviewers are trying to cause a problem. They're not trying to be bottlenecks, but either because of their mindset that that's job security to find problems, or frankly, they can't walk next door and talk to their buddy that's just a hallway over. They've got to literally send an email, and it takes days for that email to get responded to. So I think that that's another thing that we're going to have to see addressed over the coming months here moving forward.
I was at a meeting with a bunch of builders, and you have large builders, you have medium-sized builders, and you have small, right? And one of the planners came up to me. He actually works for a title company, helps on the development side, and works with planners. I guess he's not a planner himself, but he's like, some of these guys, he goes like, I call them zombie builders. They're dead. They just don't know it yet, because they're all looking outward, right? They're all looking like, we want, in Pierce County, it's Tahali, right? In King, it's 10 Trails, like these massive master plan communities, and thousands of homes, and small, medium sized guys can't compete with that. So, he's like, he sent me an article on this, the next day, because I asked him, like, send me info. I want to learn what you're seeing and who you're talking with, and it was interesting, because I think that's where we need to go. You're still going to have the planning issues. You still have the growth issues. You still have the demand, but for the small, medium-sized builders that might be struggling, might be doing, one, two, half a dozen homes a year, you're not going to compete with the national builders. Mm-hmm. They have too much money. They have too much. They can wait. They can wait it out where they can't. So how do we pivot? Where's the puck going, and how do we let's skate towards the puck, not keep going down this, and that arena is not the arena we're going to be able to survive in. We need to go over here and make our own way. You've been very quick to pivot throughout your life, from mortgage to advertising to construction. So it's interesting. It's like every time I talk to you, I feel like I'm getting more perspective, because it's important for me when I'm giving advice to clients that I understand really what that looks like 3 steps down the line. And, it is challenging. It's, you have buyer fatigue when you're beat out 20 times and you're like, am I ever going to be able to do something? But if you can create something that technically doesn't exist that still solves that problem, that's when everyone's going to win. Right. And so back to your point about the realtors and other developers, and like you only have so much capacity. We were talking about your crews and your subs. Like, to go from this level of production to this level of production is a whole nother problem. So we need more people doing it, because the more builders that are going to the planning department and doing the same thing over and over again, that repetition, that planning department has to adjust, or there's nothing's going to happen, right? And so if you have the initiative from top down, 1 million homes in the next 20 years, and you have the people that are wanting to fill that need, bottlenecks in the middle area. So at some point, I hope it passes. I hope that part passes and we get to a point where, we are efficient and we are familiar with Gordon T. Jacob. Here's the plan. Saw it 2 weeks ago, 6 months ago, 2 years ago. Does it match up with everything else that we need to do on our due diligence? Cool. Let's stamp it. There's no reason why it needs to go months and months on end to a year. And so I think the more familiar they are with people that are trying to do the same thing you're doing, hopefully that helps, because you're not going to be able to solve it yourself. But if 100 other builders and developers are going at it in the exact same way, there's a lot of opportunity out there. Right. So
this idea of pivoting, Rob, I think it really comes down to, as an entrepreneur, it's really easy for us to get stuck working in our business instead of working on our business. And when we're in our business, we're solving problems, right? And I mean, regardless of whether I'm talking about DADUs or custom remodels, custom construction, or multifamily, if I'm working in my business, then I'm dealing with a multitude of problems. It could be staffing, it could be delays in permitting, it could be costs, overruns, it could be, construction problems that are occurring on a day-to-day basis. But the problem is when you're in problem-solving mode, it's very difficult to be creative. So a mentor of mine once told me of the importance of spending, that he for like 4 decades spent Friday afternoon at what he called the river. And what he did was he had a notepad and he just wrote down creative ideas, like opportunities that he could see. And each week, like he might just write down ideas. It really doesn't have any merit. It doesn't have any meat. But then, he's coming back next Friday. And, those things were percolating in his mind throughout the week. And all of a sudden he comes back the next Friday and he adds a little bit more detail to it. Well, if you get into the habit of doing that week after week, month after month, year after year, some of those things become real opportunities. But if you don't ever spend that time to be creative, so when you think about pivoting, and like if you see somebody in business that's successfully pivoted, I can almost guarantee you they've spent necessary time working on their business, not in their business, which means they cleared their calendar to say, where are the opportunities? What are some of the roadblocks that are coming right now? What must I do? And I think back at one time we were doing a lot of flipping, and I saw things slowing down. And a friend of mine that was really my mentor in flipping, she said, I've been a real estate agent and a flipper. And if I was only a flipper, I would have had months where I couldn't make my ends meet. And that's what really encouraged me to say, I've got to do something more than just flipping. And I just think right now, if you're a realtor, if you're an investor, if you're a young person, you have to have that mindset to say, where are the opportunities that are in front of me? And then another thing, Warren Buffett is famous for saying, when people are selling, you should be buying. When people are buying, you should be selling, right? And it's just the opposite of herd mentality. And, we said this earlier, but I don't think it can be overstated. Right now, for many people, it feels scary to buy, whether that's a multifamily, whether it's a home and move out of a rental. because it's a big monthly payment. And their mindset is, if interest rates drop, then I'll buy. The problem is, and you kind of gently touched on this, you might want to go into more detail on this, but from my experience of being a lender, the purchase price is more important than the interest rate. So in other words, if today interest rates are, I don't know if they're 7 on today of this recording or whatever they are approximately, but if that's what it was, if it was 7% and a house could be bought today for, let's say, 350,000, their mindset might be, well, if interest rates are 5%, I would buy. Problem is, if they go to 5, you won't buy at 350, you'll be at 425, and your monthly payment's actually higher at 5% interest at 425 than it would have been 350 at today's interest rates. And so this really just comes back to that Buffett statement where we sabotage ourselves, because it's never comfortable to go to another level, whatever our level is. And all of it is, I mean, I had a friend one time, tell me, I was talking to him about yachts, and he's like, well, yeah, I mean, for the guy that has a 25-foot boat, the 50-foot boat is unbelievable. For somebody who has a 50-foot, 100, they can't wrap their head around it. But I think that's all of us, right? I mean, we all come from different backgrounds. Our financial positions are all different. But I think no matter who we are, if we're going to step out and try to grow, it's scary. But at some point, we just got to do it if we want to move forward.
Well, and yeah, to that point, as far as the strategy, that's why I say let's put our investor hat on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a quick version of, like, who's your favorite investor? And it's usually that's the most iconic is Warren Buffett. Okay, well, if you really have read or heard his quotes or what he says, it's talking about, like, if there's blood in the streets, that's when you buy type thing. And so, but it's my job to educate you enough to where you feel confident, and it takes that fear. Fear is the thing that's going to steer us either this way or this way. And fear is going to be removed from the equation if you educate yourself enough and you have someone that's going to counsel you enough, and that, you don't have to work with me, but I'm going to make sure I look at it as being successful if I'm helping them, whether they use me or not, because it's based on relationship. I told you that earlier. Like, I want to build as much meaningful relationships. Transactions will follow, right? And so at some point, people are going to look at that, and it's like, okay, that's why you start getting repeat business and that reputation of, okay, they're going to counsel you, they're going to help you. And that's why I work with so many financial advisors, because I also realize, like, talking to this person, if they have a financial advisor who probably has been working with them often for decades, that trust level and that relationship is way deeper than what I have right now.
Yeah.
So let's make sure we get their blessing, because I don't want to screw up what they've invested or really worked on. Your retirement plan is, by doing this, is it going to harm you? And it's funny, because that's how I've actually got more and more of those financial advisors, is because I am engaging. Like, yeah, thank you, because this would have screwed this up for them, even though what they want, like, no, you don't, you can't have it right now. You hired me to give you this advice. You need to follow this.
I love that aspect of you, because I really think mortgage can be seen as a commodity. An actual loan, whether it's a conventional or FHA loan, can be seen as a commodity. What's not a commodity is relationship. What's not a commodity is trust. And, how does somebody trust somebody that they don't know? Well, more than likely, it's because of a pattern over time that they've demonstrated. So when you're out in the marketplace and your community, and you're helping schools, or you're helping the less fortunate that need food, or for backpacks, or all the different things that you're doing, what are you doing? You're establishing this character and this integrity in the marketplace. So when somebody's looking for somebody who's trying to help them go to the next level from where they are, they want to choose somebody who has it's too late to try to build integrity at that point.
Right.
And you're doing that, and I really commend you for that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, and that's, we've talked about this, but I mean, that's not the easy way to do it. It's a lot easier to put on, like, that Instagram filter and look at me and this. It's not for the photo op or that piece of it. I try to show what we're doing, because I feel like it's important.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it because I want. I mean, look at me. I mean, I'm not. It's like I have a face for radio and a voice for silent movies type thing. So, but the reality is like no, if I really do genuinely care. I've had stuff in my life to where it's changed me to where I don't want to be transactional. I realize like I'm in an industry that I can be a commodity like that. I mean, we have really good rates, we have aggressive rates, we have really good products, we have all these things that are amazing, and what we do on the back end with our proceeds with our company, no one else is doing.
Yeah.
But we put that out there to challenge other companies to do better. We'll put our name on schools. We don't put our names on sports events. Right?
Yeah.
That's what's important. We're reinvesting back in. So I do that on a miniature level with my wife and engage my family just like you do. Like we're going to do this together. And yeah, food insecurity is big for us. Education is big for us. Things that are helping the community do better, and it has nothing to do with mortgage.
Yeah.
Right.
Honestly, we're a little bit of the same way. I mean, if somebody were to follow our company, they're going to see all throughout our website or our social media this they might see it as a tagline or a slogan, change the way you live. But change the way you live, while it might seem like a simple phrase, it's very emotional to us as a company, because what that means is that we want to partner with a mom and dad who are raising a young family that maybe never had a home when they were young and always maybe went to other people's houses when there was parties or whatever. And this family wants to have their home be the gathering place for their teenagers. And so when we come in and we do a custom remodel for them, it's not so much about the construction. It's more about that we're partnering with this mom and dad to help them fulfill this dream and goal of theirs to be able to have their home be the meeting place. When we build an apartment and somebody's lived in a kind of an old beat down type of a rental, and we provide a brand new living opportunity for them, we're helping them change the way they live. We're helping them raise their family and live in the community in the best way we know how. So we feel very privileged to be part of this community and have our little part in helping people live their best life in the Pierce County and surrounding areas.
We named the podcast Think House. And it's not like think houses in like real estate. It's we want to have an area where people can gather like a home, right? That thought is on the forefront, and it happens to tap on mortgage, real estate, and investing and everything else. But it's also bringing in people within the community that I feel are successful. And success doesn't mean monetary success always, right? It's overcoming things or building something that doesn't exist, and want to bring other people along with them, which is exactly you and your company and your family is to the T. And so I appreciate your time. I appreciate friendship. I appreciate all the advice you've given me and the counsel, and just I'm thankful for you and grateful for everything that you've done and what you do, continue to do. And I think this is a big opportunity. So the fact that you guys took time out of your day, because I know you're busy, talk about that and what those opportunities are for people that are going to watch this and listen to this. It's important. So, Chris, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, bro. It's awesome.